Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Rob Schultz. I teach AP Computer Science A at Bellbrook High School in Bellbrook, Ohio. We are now moving on into video 2 of topic 1.4, compound assignment operators. In video 1, we learned what the compound assignment operators are. Well, now we're going to look specifically at the increment and decrement operators. Again, the increment and decrement operators have a very specific function for us in Java. So we're going to continue to build on what we've done in the past. Our learning objective is still the same as the previous video. We're going to evaluate what's being stored in a variable as a result of an expression with an assignment statement. But like I said, we're going to look specifically at what the increment operator and the decrement operator are used for. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. So these are our increment and decrement operators, plus plus and minus minus. And the increment and decrement operators always have to be attached to a variable that contains a value, because what the purpose is, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's look specifically at plus plus. So, like I said, the increment operator needs to be attached to a variable because the instruction that we're giving says we want to take the value that's currently stored in X. We're going to specifically add the value of 1 to it. We're going to increment it, and then we're going to assign the result back to X. The decrement operator does virtually the same thing, except obviously we're subtracting 1 instead of adding 1, but we're still taking the value that's in X. We're performing this operation where we either add 1 or subtract 1, and then we assign the result back to X, which is where our assignment operator comes from. Now, your teacher may have shared this with you, or you may have found, if you're looking specifically at the CED that's online, there's an exclusion statement that goes with this one. Okay, there are actually 2 ways we can use the increment operator. We can either put the increment operator before the variable or after the variable, and there's a little bit of a difference as to how the operation is handled, depending on whether you put the plus plus in front of X or the plus plus after. There is a specific exclusion statement that says that the use of the increment and decrement operators in the prefix form, for example, plus plus X, or inside other expressions, like down the road when we get to arrays and using X plus plus inside the square brackets, that's outside the scope of this course. That's not part of the AP subset. So there will never be a time when you are required to use the prefix form of plus plus X of the increment or decrement operator on the AP exam. Okay, I'll leave it for you to explore a little bit if you prefer outside of this video to see what the difference is, and we're going to continue to move on. All right. Okay, so when I use the increment decrement operator, X plus plus is really the same thing as saying X equals X plus 1. I want to take the value that's in X, I want to assign 1 to it, and then once I've done that, I want to take the value that results and store it back in X, which means that really if you think back to what we talked about in video 1, X plus plus is also the same as X plus equals 1. Remember, the instruction here was to take the value that's currently in X, add my value to it, and then assign the value back to X. So in this case, we're simply doing our addition compound assignment operator with a value of 1. We're just adding 1 to it. But again, this is kind of a shortcut. If I'm using a counter that I'm counting up or counting down, X plus plus or X minus minus makes for a very easy way to do that. All right, so just like we did in video 1 of topic 1.4, we're going to do a little exercise where you trace the code. And in this case, now we've got 2 variables that we're going to work with. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video in a second. And again, we're going to be the compiler. I want you to trace the code on paper to determine the output. And remember that when we become the compiler, that means that on a piece of paper, we're going to do exactly what the compiler would do, line by line, step by step. Okay, so whenever you're ready, go ahead and pause the video, take some time and trace the code on paper, and then once you've finished, go ahead and press play, and we'll continue. Okay, welcome back. Let's see how we did. All right, so when we trace our code on paper, again, we're going to allocate space either on the side of the page or on a separate piece of paper, and we're going to walk through and we are going to literally become the compiler. We are going to do exactly what the compiler does. All right, so we're going to start by creating an integer variable. We're going to declare an integer variable X, and we're going to initialize that variable to 2. So X starts out with a value of 2. Then we're going to declare a second variable Y, and we're going to initialize the value of that variable to 7. Okay, now as we work through the rest of our little program, the next line says that we're going to add 1 to X. We're going to take the value that currently is stored in X, we're going to add 1 to it, and we're going to store the result back to X. So X now becomes 3. The line following that, we're going to use the decrement operator on Y. So we're going to take the value that's currently in Y, in other words, 7. We're going to subtract 1, and we're going to store the result back in Y. So Y now has a value of 6. And then the last two lines are simply to display our output. We're going to tell the system.out object to print the value that's currently stored in X using print line, which means we're going to jump down to the next line when we're done. And then we're going to tell system.out to display the value currently stored in Y. So we end up with 3 and 6. And that becomes our final output for this little segment of code. Okay, so our big takeaways for this one. Okay, again, like I said, we're still figuring out how to evaluate what's being stored in a variable as a result of an expression with an assignment statement. The increment operator and decrement operators are forms of assignment statement. There's an assignment that takes place. The increment operator plus plus and decrement operator minus minus are simply used to add one or subtract one from the stored value of a variable or an array element, and we'll talk about array elements further down the road. The new value is then assigned to the variable or the array element. So once I do that addition or subtraction, the new value automatically gets assigned back to the variable. Okay. Thank you again for watching. Again, I can't stress this enough. Please continue to watch future videos. If you feel like you need some review, you can always go back and look at previous videos. Have a great day, and I'll see you the next time.